afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I figured that was my fault, not yours. The future of dating, careers, and matrimony in Africa. Has anybody ever thought about that? We've thought about technology, we've thought about everything else, but nobody has ever thought about the future of dating and matrimony, marriages in Africa. First and foremost, this is the second time that relationships in Africa has been disrupted. The first time happened when ships sailed in and the nuclear family was broken. The second time happened when technology flew in and millennials felt the need to connect to the world. I think that as African millennials, we have become so conscious about technology, everything moving. Everyone's talking about the fourth industrial revolution, except for the advancement of human beings and human relationships. And this is where it all started for me. I realized that the core of our issue as Africans was that our cultures were so rigid. It was so fixed in traditions. It was so fixed on, our beliefs. And then came people that told us about religion. And so we were formed to believe in some sort of structure, and that formed our society. But now, the dangerous thing with that was, with a rigid mindset, you sort of just live your life with like shutters in your eyes. So basically, you start a relationship, and 6 months into it, you're thinking, is this it? Is this really it? Should there be something else? And then you go on to your dating apps, and you find somebody else that seems to have something that fancies you. And there goes your previous partner, and on to the next. This problem has caused something that I've seen where it literally kind of implicates our need for meaning and our need for success, because this it syndrome is typical to the workplace, where you sit in a job and you're thinking, is this it? Should there be more? What is my purpose? So now there's this constant conflict that we face as human beings in our dating careers, where we are like, maybe there's something else. But now this kind of conflicts with our need for meaning and how we define success. And now, even though human beings are wired for connection, you find that we have now traded places with our careers, where, as I'm saying, relationships now, just like our careers, have become, that we use them in the same typical kind of way. I have seen that with Is This It syndrome, that African millennials seek identity more than anything else. But also African millennials, or millennials at large, seek connection. And these things become very contradictory, because in the pursuit for identity, you also have this need for connection. But the pursuit for identity means that you're going to sort of close yourself up and isolate yourself to the world when you're trying to find it. So you want to be an individual. How does this affect us? How does dating, careers, and matrimony affect us? How does Is This It affect us? I went on and I thought about that. In my life, I live life as a African millennial specialist, which is why I'm speaking about African millennials, specifically in the African space. I focus on human behavior and how it affects us in technology, and more especially in relationships. I've written a book called Finding Makoti, which is an introspective book that kind of goes on the journey about manhood and how modern men have been affected today and how African men have been affected today. So let's get into it. Dating careers. Now, this is a subconsciously compiled resume that we all have at the back of our heads, where, as you know, remember those questions where they asked you, so how many girls have you been with once you're married? Or how many people have you slept with? These are the careers that we're actually starting to build, because now more than often we get into more engagements and more careers and more sexual connections. Now, I've also realized that we date strangely these days. It's either we date based on feelings and kind of discount the logic aspect, or we discount the feelings and date on logic. We can't seem to find some sort of balance in that. And one of the core reasons that causes that is access, right? We have been given so much access to the world that we cannot take time now to think, introspect, spend time with loved ones, give time in this pursuit for time and wanting quality time and all these precious things. We've actually taken all that away because of how the world has given us access. We no longer are close, but we've been driven further apart, especially in Africa, which was once called the dark continent. And now more than ever, we really do need that darkness to just close us off the toxicity and everything that exists in the world. The second reason has been that we are now prone to adaptation as Africa. Like I said, Africa is a dark continent, or was called the dark continent, and all we ever do is just catch up. And thinking about this, it means that every time it is that we adapt to something that is foreign to us, we just have to stick to the systems that are given to us. And now in global relations and the trend that is going on where, like I said, the use of dating apps and everything else, there's been so much chaos that has been caused within the African landscape in that regard. Millennials, African millennials to be specific, are now more confused than ever about finding the right partner. The second thing that we now face, or the third thing rather that we now face in regards to dating, is that we see this thing called individualism. And like I said in the beginning, where we have gone from a space where, as Africans, we used to have community and we used to speak to one another and all these amazing things that were very human-centric and very important to human beings and the human structure of things. Now we face a time where everyone wants to be an individual, where you shop, how you dress, how you look. But the more it is that we want to be individuals, we actually end up looking the same. I've seen this with women, They go shopping for clothes and then they get to an event and suddenly they're all dressed in the same way. They wear the same hair. They have the same makeup on. And this was a very interesting question to me because we're trying to move further away and be individuals, but now we seem to be more alike. And now there's this thing that I've also stumbled upon where people have this, I deserve someone that can accept me the way I am or love me for me. This has caused us to sort of be very selfish in the way we approach love because it's no longer doing for somebody else, but doing for yourself. And this is because of isolation. When you're sitting in an isolated place, as African millennials, when you're in a monogamous relationship with somebody, you start to form a possessive trait. Because you spend so much time alone, when you do find somebody that fulfills a need that you have craved for a long time, you start to possess them. So this basically means that, you want a person that can be with you only for you. You no longer want to serve. It's about how this person can do for you. And I find that very wild. This leads to the sense of entitlement amongst African millennials, where they believe they deserve success, money, happiness, and happy relationships. I find it rather odd. And this has led me to this particular finding, where I realize that we as African millennials now sit in a place where we are now marrying for money, materialistic matrimony. Just a quick question, has anybody ever thought about that? How you actually now get into relationships to marry for money? Anybody, somebody? Okay, by a show of hands, has anybody ever thought about how people are now marrying for money? Yes, put your hands up if you believe that. Interesting. How many people believe that money is important in relationships? Show of hands. Interesting. How many people believe that financial provision is a man's job? Ladies? Interesting. How many people believe in equality in relationships and marriage? Hands up. A lot of feminists in the room. Interesting. So here you are saying that you want a man to provide, but yet you want equality. But here you are saying that you believe that money is important in the relationship, but who brings in the money? So where is the equality in that? And what exactly do we call this thing called equality? The crazy thing is now, lines have blurred and life has just become so much confusing because women now these days, as I've seen it as a man, you want a man with the right kind of job, who drives the right kind of car, and somebody who wears the right kind of clothes and the right kind of brands. And this is how we identify with ourselves. So you're sitting unhappy and you're alone, and then you would want somebody that can kind of fulfill that need in what they have and what the finance can bring them. I find it pretty absurd. This leads to this thing called insecurities. Now, our desire for this chase, for this modern life that we live, has caused us now to be insecure human beings. And this is going to lead to a phenomenon that we call chronic loneliness. Just by a show of hands, if you're brave enough, how many of you feel lonely? Wow. If you were brave, but I believe that everybody else does. And this chronic loneliness leads to something that is going to come up in the next decade that is called emotional illness. I'm sure we're all aware of mental illnesses, right? Yes? In the next decade, we're going to face something that is called emotional illness. Because people have discovered that your mental state and your emotional state are actually two different things. And now more than ever, we are suffering from emotional illness. And once you start suffering from this bug called emotional illness, in however way they'll diagnose it, that means that your ability to feel is now disabled. I think that's pretty dangerous. The one thing that we need as human beings to feel becomes disabled, and it will now be labeled an illness if you cannot do that, thanks to technology. How do we fix this? Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? I have realized that as Africans and as African millennials, separating ourselves from the rest of the world, because I realized that the world is what actually caused this. We were fine. We need to head back a couple of steps. Number one, we need to unlearn. Unlearning is the one thing that I think a lot of human beings need to start doing, because we always keep learning and taking things in. But now more than ever, we need to take time to unlearn. And as Richard Rohr actually defines it, he says, transformation is often more about unlearning than learning. So let's stop with trying to know more and trying to know better, and actually sit down and start unlearning. How do we do that? Well, we need to start rethinking modern relationships and redirect our need for belonging, because the need for belonging is what got us here. Number two, we need to reconsider Western romanticism and explore modern traditional and cultural ideologies as Africans. Number three, we need to redefine African tradition, because you see, we faced a time where technology was coming in, our parents was telling us this, and we wanted to kind of figure out what is right, what is wrong. The one thing that we haven't done is to sit down and say, where are the scholars? How do they now start philosophizing and coming up with ideologies that are going to modernize African traditions? We don't have to lose them. We don't have to give up one for the other. But if we take the other, we will be lost. And if we take what was the former, we will still be lost in the dark continent. We need to find a way to navigate in between that. We need to also reinstitute and reevaluate this thing called lobola as a trade-off, right? Because the biggest problem that we face in matrimony today is how lobola is perceived and what its use is for. My idea has been that lobola needs to be now taken as a form of trade-off and literally be put into a form of inheritance, for future family. So, for example, ladies, if your husband decides to divorce you for whatever reason, you still have these funds to carry you through and your kids. The kids can still go to school. And I'm thinking, will he actually leave you? Chances are not. Would he want to give up that money knowing that he still has it banked somewhere? That's what I really think about this idea called lobola. Also, we need to start to explore the state of African millennialism. Now, millennialism is a state of joy, a state of happiness, this euphoric place that we all feel that we can belong. But as Africans, how do we take millennialism and actually define it for us in a way that it makes sense, where we are all actually happy, where we don't suffer from chronic illnesses, where we don't suffer from emotional illnesses? How are we going to start doing that? And this is something that I really need you to think about. But before I go, I want to also introduce to you this concept where in the past decade, there was this thing called, aesthetics and personal branding. We're still there, entering into a new decade next year. And what happened is that people have now put themselves in a position where you are perceived as. You are not what you are. And funny enough, when a lot of you meet a lot of people that you see on the social that has perceived themselves as, they're not what you thought they were. But now, in this current decade or the forthcoming decade, new concepts are going to start rising, which one we have seen, which is authenticity. Awareness is the second one, and meaningfulness is the third one. And I want us to sort of start thinking about these three things as individuals and how we can better ourselves as human beings, because as much as technology is there for us and it'll help us, the one thing that you will not survive in that fourth industrial revolution phase is yourself. Do you want to die? Do you want to be ill? Chances are no. So stop looking into these concepts of authenticity, awareness, and meaningfulness. Authenticity, first and foremost. You've got to find who you authentically are. Take time away from the world and figure out who you are. Away from ideologies, things that you've been taught, things that you understand about how the world was, the structures, the systems. Sit down and be like, how am I going to be a true and authentic human being? Number two, you need to be very self-aware. Before self-love, which you see the world is preaching that quite a lot, you need to be self-aware before you can actually love yourself. And how do you go about being self-aware? Secondly, you need to start mastering your skills and the things that you do and your abilities so that it can draw you away from wanting to belong. Thirdly, there's this beautiful concept that is called fluidity. Now, fluidity means that you are able to flow constantly within whatever challenges and everything else that you face. Remember what I said in the beginning. We were taught systems and structures, and Africans lived life in a rigid form. And right now, more than ever, African millennials need to start exploring this form of fluidity. How do you be fluid? How do you navigate amongst political, economical climates, and also with regards to relations? Now, the beautiful thing about everything that I said is that there's this word that is called quality of life. The one thing that all that is going to do for you, and the idea that I was trying to bring to this table, was that we need to start focusing on the quality of our lives. Because after Instagram has passed, Facebook, people that you socialize with, alcohol, the hangouts, the events, the photos, what remains? When you die, what legacy do you leave? Who is around you? And the only way to get to this quality of life is by making sure that you're very self-aware, that you're a fluid human being, and that also that you have mastered your skill sets, your personality, and everything that is at the core of you, and that you are very conscious about where your life is going and who you are around. So, how do we still have a chance at relationships and marriage in the future? I believe so, yes. And the only way, like I said, was when you take time to reconsider, reevaluate how you date, what you date, who has damaged you in the past, how broken you are as a human being, and actually sit down, like just recollect, get rid of the dump. And I think there, when you are at that place where you truly know who you are, then you will find somebody that is similar to you, because only the aware see the aware, and only the aware see the unaware. But when you are unaware, there's nothing that you're going to see. You're going to keep tripling into these things, and you're going to have this long list and this long resume of failed relationships. The change is going to start with unlearning and then finding yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Scotty. I know I was a bit trippy in the beginning, but thank you for listening to my TED Talk.